right, so we have Linda's image to start us off. And Linda, I really appreciated everything you said about your images or your image and telling the whole story of how you got here. I think that led everyone to share more about their experience, and I think that's really useful. So I appreciate you starting us off on the right foot with that. You're at ISO 100, 56 millimeters, f7.1 at 1/15th of a second. That 1/15th of a second, I would guess that you would want to be on a tripod for that. But in your explanation of everything, I don't remember you mentioning a tripod, and I can imagine that a tripod would be inconvenient for this assignment because you're going into someone's space and everything needs to be set up correctly, and just setting up the tripod is like one more thing for you to do. So I'm not sure if you used a tripod or not, but your image is nice and sharp. There's no issue at all with any blur here. Your subject is sitting by this van from the food truck, and I like that you mentioned that we can see the reflection of the desert in this reflection on the van here. I also think the van and probably everything that's around, including the dirt and the lightness of the dirt, is allowing the bright light that's behind her to reflect all around, and it creates a good quality of light on her face. It's not really directional. It's a little bit flat, but we're still able to see quite good detail, and we get some nice highlights on the bridge of her nose and her forehead that I think are working well. You're communicating not just that there's this individual that's going about their business like you would have if you had captured someone just walking on the strip, or if you had captured someone just eating their meal, but this is telling us more about her. We're learning about what she does with her time, as she has this hobby of these little wire trees that she's making. So by including that, we're getting to know the subject in a different way, and I think that really builds out your image. I think that's much stronger than what either of your other ideas would have been. And I'm not sure what the other woman looked at. I haven't looked at your contact sheet, so maybe there are some gems out of that, but her fingernails here matching the chair, like that visual cohesion is going a long way in this image. So I think that really adds to your the overall visual cohesion of the image. You have an area in the background that's really blown out. That's fine. You did a great job on controlling the light and getting the exposure correct on your subject. And then here, yeah, it looks like you photographed this girl many times, and as I'm looking at it, she looks so much younger when she takes her mask off. I thought she was much older. So it's fun to see how that mask is kind of hiding her identity a little bit, and getting closer, showing the detail of what she's working on, makes for stronger images. This is really beautiful light that you have in these images. That warmer light creates a nice atmosphere. I also enjoy seeing the table here that gives us more information about that these are things that she's selling. All right, this is Cyan's image. We're at ISO 1600, so pretty high ISO, 50 millimeters, which is a normal lens, f5.6, which is probably a good choice here, at 1/40th of a second. So all those settings look okay. Let's take a closer look at some of the midtones and see if we see digital noise. And we can. I'm often looking in like the shadow of the neck is where you can reliably tell if there's digital noise, that mid-tone area, and we see that digital noise. So you're kind of in a tricky spot here. So either you'd want to be on a tripod for this image. I don't know if that's something that would have been workable for you. You could open up your aperture more. Instead of shooting this at f5.6, you could shoot this at f4, f2.8 if your lens goes there. That would give you more light. You don't really want a longer shutter speed because we want this to be a still image. You mentioned that you are kind of down because the weather was bad. And I think photographs when it's raining out can be some of the best images. Like, it creates a mood. You have the reflection of the light on the ground and on the buildings and whatnot. You have, like, right after a rain, you have beautiful light coming through. So I would recommend really embracing the bad weather, even if you don't like it, because it can create really beautiful images. Your subject here seemed to be working with you. It sounded like you were able to spend a good amount of time with him. And I wonder if you were able to direct him at all. And maybe we can look at your contact. That's not your contact sheet. Look at your contact sheet, and it doesn't look like you were directing him. It looks like he was just sitting there allowing you to photograph him. But as you can see, this side of his face has nice light on it. And when we look at the image that you submitted, he's pretty much in shadow. So changing your angle of view to photograph the side of his face that has the better light on it, or maybe directing him so that he's looking at you in this image so that it's more of like a more formal portrait if you want, I think could improve this image. I really want to focus on light this module and how we can improve the light. And it's not necessary that you need to find a whole new location in many cases. Many times it's just that you need to adjust the way that where you're set up with your subject or where the subject's looking. I really appreciate that you got behind him and you photographed all these different angles. I can tell that you spent a lot of time here photographing and picking the best situation. And then this image is by Angie. You're at ISO 800, 55 millimeters, f4 at 1/10 of a second. Now, let's look at your lens. F4 is as wide as you can go with that lens. So, I mean, the back and forth that you hear from me has to be frustrating because the number one concern in images is that your images are sharp. So that's our first thing, is that our images need to be sharp. And then the second thing is that you don't want any digital noise in your images. So if you have a high ISO but your image is sharp, I might still tell you you have a high ISO, and that might get really frustrating for you. But I want you to understand this balance that we're working on. So in this image, you're shooting it at ISO 800, but we aren't sharp on his eyes. You can't open up your aperture anymore. And at 1/10 of a second, it looks like he just moved a little bit. I don't think this is a focus issue. I think this is just him moving a little bit. So what you need to do is to raise your ISO. So instead of 1/10 of a second, maybe you shoot it at 1/20th of a second if you shot it at ISO 1600, or maybe even 1/40th of a second, and then you're raising your ISO to 3200, which is pretty high, and you're for sure going to hear from me on that. But it's better than having an image where you're having some movement happening here. Also, maybe moving towards the window. It looks like, from what I see in his eyes, that the window is in the background. It's creating a beautiful catchlight in his eyes. It's bringing us right in. So if you had him move towards the window, he sounded like he was game for this, right? You're at the restaurant, you're giving him business, he's interested in having a photograph taken. So it seems like he's working with you. So moving him a little bit closer to that window, so maybe you don't have to raise that ISO, but you can hold on to a sharper image because there would be more light, and then you would have a faster shutter speed, would be better here. You got really close to him, so this has a nice intimate feel to him. And it looks like there's bottles maybe of wine in the background, maybe just bottles of alcohol of some sort in the background. And that aspect of it, I think you could embrace as well, that he is in the restaurant and that it sounds like maybe he owns a restaurant, or he wants images for the restaurant, right? So embracing that environment could give us some more information about him. Looking here, we can see a little bit more of the bottles in the background. Looks like he's behind the counter. Oh yeah, you said he was you were shooting over the bar. This looks like better light. Let's see here, a 15th of a second still. But maybe one of these is still. I'd really push you to find an image that's still, that you're not having any camera shaking.